let's try this. Each person wishing to speak is asked to speak into the microphone, identify themselves, and respectively limit their comments to 3 minutes. All speakers are to conduct themselves in a civil manner. Obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments and/or concerns to the superintendent during regular business hours. With that, I leave the microphone open to anybody who would like to make a comment for us.
Good evening, everyone, and a Happy New Year, because I haven't seen you since 2024. If you remember, I'm Natalie Wren from Mothers Out Front. Since last time I dropped by, our team has grown to 23 local residents who are really excited about, working for a livable climate for our kids. And while I know you probably enjoyed the respite from our comments on electric school buses, I thought you might miss me, so I'm here again to tell you, just to give you a little bit of an update. So first, thank you to Mr. Cragen for forwarding my email back in December about West Point tours. They did apply to the EPA funding for 10 school buses. So we're thrilled to hear that they're as excited or invested in this project as we are. And I want to thank you all. Thanks to those who chatted with me offline and offered some questions or concerns, or just to have a conversation. We're really grateful from Mothers Out Front that you're willing to consider this project. So, of course, we're all aware that the political landscape has changed, and it's likely that the EPA funding for electric school buses is probably not available to us at the moment. However, I wanted to come to you let me step back, just to remind you that NYSERDA, New York State's school, like the clean, I can't remember what it is, NYSBIP, the school bus program, does have a lot of funding still available to our district. And I'm urging the school board to please consider pursuing those programs. So the next step, just a reminder, even without the EPA funding, NYSERDA's funding can still lead to a cost-neutral or an almost cost-neutral transition or purchase of a bus. So the next step for us is to have West Point Tours apply for NYSERDA's funding to conduct that full fleet electrification plan. This is something I'd mentioned to y'all before, and I might have emailed you a link to a very convoluted government site, which you're probably familiar with. I've got a little bit more decipherable documents that I'd be very happy to send to you and to Mr. Dade, and you're welcome to share them with the board. But for now, that seems like the most obvious next step. So we think it's really important to start working on this plan now. It'll answer our questions, and it'll let us know exactly what kind of resources we need as we start working to meet that New York State mandate. And, I would like to just mention that another step that we've taken is reaching out to our local legislators, so Senator Skoufis and Assemblyman Yukis, if that's how you pronounce, okay, Assemblyman Yukis, to get their support with bringing Central Hudson into the party, making sure that they're aware of our needs as a district. And yeah, so I'll send an email to you all. Please, thank you for reading it in advance. And I'm going to pass this on to my colleague, Lofton.
Hi, I'm Lofton Reiser. Good to see you all again. I just wanted to take a moment to kind of dispel some of the misinformation about some of the perceived drawbacks of going to electric school buses. Overall, they've proven to be very safe. They are actually less likely to be involved in fires than vehicles powered by diesel or gasoline. In 2022, there was a study done, and 1,530 combustion-powered vehicles per 100,000 were involved in vehicle fires, compared to just 25 electric vehicles per 100,000. That's electric vehicles across the board, but the engines themselves are, overall much less likely to be involved in fires. They are also, the buses specifically are less likely to roll over. And I know that's a thing that we have to worry about in this area more than some other areas. The location of the batteries at the base of the vehicle gives them a lower center of gravity than traditional engines. And they do lose their battery capacity in very cold weather. That's one of the concerns about them. It's about to 80% of their rated range at 32 degrees and about 60% at 10 degrees. However, today's electric buses can travel 100 to 200 plus miles on a charge, and that's much longer than the average 80-mile route. So most routes are still feasible even in cold weather. And, you know, the school bus company can allocate the electric buses to some of the shorter routes if necessary during cold weather. West Point Tours did conduct a Central Hudson electrification assessment with our electric grid. West Point Tours currently has the capacity to run 4 electric school buses. Additionally, as Natalie mentioned, we have been in touch with our representatives to make sure that they're aware of our needs and that they can get behind us on wanting this for our district. So, it is not as uphill of a climb getting this funding, getting everything going as it may seem like. And as Natalie mentioned, she is going to provide Mr. Cragen and Dade with some more information that will help really make it easier for everyone to take the next steps to get this going. So, the money is there. Let's take advantage of it. We pay into it for our taxes anyway. Like I said the last time I was here, why not us? Why not let our community benefit from this money? Because someone else will take it if we don't. So I'd love for my kid personally and all of our kids to, have a cleaner breathing, at least begin the process of everybody getting a cleaner ride to school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to join us for a public comment? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item in our agenda. Madeline and Ava will present the student representative reports. Take it away, please.
This is the good news for Cornwall Elementary School. After a very restful winter break, Cornwall Elementary School is back in the swing of things and staying busy with lots of events and activities. On January 6th, we were thrilled to welcome the Hudson Highland Nature Museum to our building. Staff members from the museum pushed into first grade classrooms and taught them all about the animal kingdom. They covered topics such as animal characteristics, used for classification, life cycles, habitats, specialized adaptations, and more. They also introduced the students to a snake, a toad, a frog, and even a blue-tongued stink. The students had a wonderful time getting to know the animals and the habitats they need to survive. We hope to see the Hudson Highland Nature Museum again soon. The CES Drama Club put on an amazing production of The Lion King Jr. this month. Our talented and dedicated students put on 3 incredible shows, an open dress rehearsal on Friday, and 2 performances on Saturday. Congratulations to Director John Hines and all the staff members and Cornwall parents involved in bringing this show to life. We can't wait to see the next one. Our 4th grade classes, along with Mrs. Moore's, Miss Monda's, and Mrs. Lauk's 3rd grade classes, attended Education Day at West Point. They watched Army women's basketball play against Holy Cross. The students had such a great time. Our teachers are now preparing their students for CBT New York State ELA testing simulation on Tuesday, January 28th. They are gearing up for the math and ELA state tests in the upcoming months, which will be completely computer-based for the first time. We are looking forward to the choral workshop, President's Day weekend, and hopefully some warmer weather.
This is the Willow Ave Good News for January. Willow Avenue kicked off the new year with kindness. Our students have been learning about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We have heard that Dr. King had a dream where everybody would be kind, helpful, and respectful to one another. Ms. Hogan and Ms. Bell's third grade class were inspired after reading an article in Scholastic magazine about a group of students who raised money to send a veteran from the Hudson Valley on an honor flight. The next honor flight is in April. With the support of the PTO, they took over the sale of popcorn during lunch on January 17th. They advertised the event, bagged the popcorn, sold it, and counted up the proceeds. In February, they will sponsor Hearts for Heroes, and in March, we'll sponsor Pops for a Purpose. Our fourth graders will travel to urban air for a day filled with STEAM fun activities. Have a wonderful week and stay warm.
And now the good news for COH. The character trait of integrity has been prevalent through the COH community during the month of January. Students have been reminded daily that integrity is how you act and what you do when nobody is looking. During the month of January, many random acts of kindness have been awarded to students who have been caught showing integrity. On January 22nd, the students in the first grade, along with the student council, loaded several cars with the donations from the Keep It Clean drive that was held in December. The items were then taken to the Hudson Valley Food Bank. The children were scheduled to walk to the food bank, however, the cold temperatures prevented that from happening. The experience of collecting materials for others in need was very educational and gratifying for the children in the student council and the first grade. This January, the PTO and the fourth grade student council have been working in conjunction with the local Lions Club on the Crayon Initiative. The Crayon Initiative is a small organization that takes old used crayons and melts them and remanufactures them into bright, clean, paper-free form. The new crayons are then shipped to children's hospitals all over the country. Each floor at COH has a crayon collection box, which will hopefully be filled with old used crayons and then given to the Crayon Initiative. The third and fourth grade students participated in a simulated New York State computer-based math assessment today, January 27th. The teachers and students have been working to take exams on their Chromebooks. The hope is to get the students used to test taking on a new platform and to test the capability of the network in the building. January brought the start of drum rehearsals at COH. The PTO is excited for the upcoming production of Newsies. The adults and students involved are super excited to once again be working towards putting on a show for a live audience.
Now we have the middle school good news. The CCMS music department held their winter concerts at CCHS. The audience was treated to beautiful performances by all of our bands, orchestra, and choruses. Many thanks to the CCMS music department for all of our work planning these events. We appreciate all you do to allow our students to make music. CCMS students in grades 5 through 8 took part in a computer-based testing simulation to prepare for the New York State assessments this spring. Students and teachers practiced Access and Nextura system and submitting a short 10-question trial while our administration and IT staff monitored the back end to make sure everything was prepared for the spring. Students in Mr. Daniels' technology classes designed, built, and raced their CO2 cars. During the process, students developed valuable skills that go beyond just building a car. They learn about the scientific method, problem solving, teamwork, and the importance of creativity and innovation. Lastly, we have the good news for the high school. December and January were busy months at CHS. The concert choir kicked off the holiday season with their annual caroling tour, spreading festive cheer through performances at the local schools. Before the new year begun, we came together to honor the life of one of our own at the Glenn McGinnis basketball tournament. The event was a heartfelt tribute and celebrated the life of a pillar in our community. Throughout both months, our school showed incredible generosity with numerous drives collecting items for homeless shelters and animal shelters. These efforts made a positive impact on our community and exemplified the compassion of our students. In sports, CHS track and field made history by becoming Division II champions, showcasing the dedication and talent of our athletes. This week marks the start of the second semester for Cornwall schools. The high school will be implementing a new method to limit congestion in the parking lot during morning drop-off. They will create 2 lanes to eliminate the bottleneck when leaving the parking lot. All in all, December and January were months filled with reflection, generosity, and pride as we look forward to the rest of the school year.
Thank you both very much for that update. Anything else you'd like to add, or? Good. Thank you very much. Next item in our agenda is the superintendent's update. Mr. Dade.
Due to the length of our next discussion, I'm going to cede my time to Ms. Argenio, so I'm going to pass.
Okay. I'm next with the president's update, and I will try to be brief, but there are a few things that I think are important. The board probably knows most of these, but the public might not know all of them. First, I got a 1A and a 1B here. The governor released her proposed budget this past week, and as her current proposal has the state aid amount, the total state aid amount increasing 2.99% for our district, which is of course good news, and we hope that it stays there. Additionally, I would assume most of you have seen in the news that she is proposing a cell phone ban from bell to bell at all school buildings in the state. So stay tuned for more on that from the state. I won't get into the details there because everyone knows my stance on it, but that may be a discussion that we need to have. We will see what the legislature has to do on that. RFP for legal representation has gone out. As that's been a topic of discussion, wanted to update everybody there. Strategic planning is one of our board goals this year. We met as a strategic planning sort of ad hoc committee last week. Myself, Christine, Christian, Eleonora, and Terry, and the 5 of us agreed on a vendor. I didn't put it on this week's agenda because, as Terry said, we have a packed agenda, but that will be coming soon. Just as a general update for our board and the public, the residents of Shadowwood Lane asked for a meeting with us. Myself, Mr. Dade, Mr. Fink, and Walter Moran went and met with them a few weeks ago, about a week, last week? Last week. Time flies when you're having fun. And had a good discussion with them and said that moving forward in terms of planting trees, for visual mitigation as well as sound mitigation steps, that we would present some solutions to them in the future. So that's it for my president's update. And the next item is the state data and curriculum presentation.
Jim, can I ask you just a quick clarifying
Yes.
question? So on the strategic planning, I thought
Yes.
we left it as we were going to go back just to make sure that the quoted prices were still in force.
There were a few follow-up items, yes.
And
yeah.
have we gotten clarification on that? No, not yet. Okay.
Yeah. Take it away, Megan. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. And thank you for postponing this from the last Board of Ed meeting because you would not have wanted me here. My family had the flu, so I kept my cooties away from everybody. But so this evening I will present our assessment highlights, and then at the end we'll do a curriculum update and just almost like teasers of upcoming presentations that I can certainly give to the board upon your request. Good? Okay. So the first part will cover the 3-8 test refusals, 3-8 exams for ELA and math, and then our New York State Regents results. And the second part will be next steps. As I always do in the past, we look at where we've done a really nice job, where we have work to do, and then just a general curriculum update. And just so everybody knows, this information is extracted from the New York State Report Card and School Meter is populated by the New York State Education Department. Okay, so just to give you a little flow of timeline, I shared previously last year our state assessments are changing in regards to alignment with the next gen state standards. So spring of 2023 was the first administration of the new 3 through 8 ELA and math exams. This past spring was the first administration of grade 5 and 8 science and algebra 1. And then as we look forward to this spring, we'll administer the first round of geometry and biology. And then as you can see moving forward, we'll take algebra, or it's gonna be earth and space science. Moving forward, it's gonna be called that ELA. And then 2027 rounds us out with chemistry and physics. So in taking a look, everything I have is linked for you. So on your own time, you can certainly go back, do a deeper dive if you choose to. This is currently live on my page, so if anybody wanted to follow along that way, they can. I'm not going to click each link, but you'll see that they are all available for you if you want to see those memos as to where the timelines are for the alignment schedules. Okay, so looking at our 3-8 refusal report this past spring, we had, for grades 3 through 8, we had 1,171 students across the 3-8 levels, or 85% of our students participate in the exams. As a reminder, when we look at what this means, our 3-8 exams are based on a 1 to 4 measure. So 1 is below proficient, 2 is partially proficient, 3 is proficient, and 4 is exceeding proficiency. The next couple of slides will show a comparison of our state proficiency from our district against the state. And so you'll see here, and this is in our report card, I just snapped the slides from it. Overall, our grade 3 through 8 ELA proficiency was at 67% compared to 46% across the state. So you can see the breakdown on each grade level. And then this is just another slide that breaks it out a little bit more, and it will show the number of students across each of the 1 through 4 levels. And then remember, proficiency is declared for levels 3 and 4. So you can see from grades 3, 4, 5 through 8 where we were in our proficiency level, and then overall 67% as a district for 3-8 compared to the 46% as a state level standard. And then I just gave this to you guys again. If you, I'll do it for the next slide, but for subgroups, if you wanted to take a deeper dive, you could certainly do that. This is every subgroup that the data is extracted for. We couldn't do a presentation that would cover every single one of those areas, but if you were to go into the report card, I can show you here. So this is what I just showed you above. That's the snapshot. This is the bigger breakdown. But let's say we wanted to look at, for example, female students in grade 3 ELA. So 109 female students took the exam. 100 were tested, 109 are in the grade. So if we look across here, 9 were not tested, they refused. We have 92% of our students overall did take the exam. 10% scored a level 1. These are for our female 3rd grade students. 16% were at a level 2. 52% were at a level 3, and 22% were at a level 4. So our 3rd grade females scored a 74% proficiency overall. And then you can see that breakdown for each one of the subgroups I shared before, as well as for every test, grades 3 through 8. So you can certainly take a deeper dive. If you had a question on any particular grade level or a subgroup, you can take a look at that. Go ahead, Bess.
Bass, could you just speak into the microphone for the folks watching on the YouTube? They can't hear you. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Thank you. When we say the percent proficient, that's kind of the yellow and blue chart. This comprises level 3 and 4 put together?
Correct. Yep, so that's our students who ranked at a level 3 or a level 4, and then of the students who took it, you see that percentage based on that. Good question. Okay, so as we look across, so that's our state comparison. If we look at our countywide comparison for 3-8 ELA, this past spring, our 3rd grade students ranked 1st in the county. They previously ranked 1st as well. Grade 4 ranked 1st. They previously ranked 2nd. We ranked 2nd in grade 5, previously 3rd, 1st and 6th, previously 1st, 3rd in grade 7, we did go down, we were 2nd previous, and we ranked 1st in grade 8, previously 4th, and overall our combined 3-8 ELA, we ranked 1st in the county. Yeah, yes. Okay, so mathematics, I have it set up in the same format, just so it's easier for everybody to follow. Again, we had an 85% participation rate of our students combined for grades 3 through 8. You can see the breakdown. It does seem to vary between the grades, and it does seem to decrease in participation as the kids move up in the grades. Compared to our younger levels, they're a very high participation rate, but overall we're at an 85%. Again, the reminders, Bass, just so you had there too. Again, the level 1 is below, 2 is partially, at 3 is proficient, 4 is exceeds, and then the 3-4 is the combination of the two. Okay, so as a district for grades 3 through 8, we scored at 77% proficiency for our 3-8 students. The state was at 54%. You can see for each one of the grade levels across and how we ranked compared to the state. And then again, this slide just breaks it down a little bit more in regards to where we fell within each one of the levels and per grade. So we did very well as well in math. These are our subgroups. If you wanted to take a peek, you could pop right back on there. Now this is for math. The previous one was for ELA. So same thing, you just saw these two slides. But let's look down maybe at 4th grade this time. And this is 3 through 8. If we looked at this time, say, male students. So in our district for 4th grade students, we have 134 male students, 122 tested, which means that we had 9% not testing. Of those students who did test, 5% were level 1, 10% were level 2, or 12 students. 60 of our students tested at a level 3, or 49%, and level 4, 44% of our male students tested at a level 4, or 36%, which means of our male students in 4th grade, 85% are proficient, okay? And then you guys, again, if you choose to, you can break this down on any one of these subgroups that's noted, and you can do the same exercise throughout for all the levels. We have up to 8th grade, and then the algebra. Okay, so our math countywide comparison for 3-8, we ranked 3rd for 3rd. For 4th grade, we ranked 1st place. We were previously 1st place. For 5th grade, we ranked 1st place. We were previously 2nd place. For grade 6, we ranked 1st place. We were also previously 1st place. Grade 7, we ranked 3rd. We did go down. We were 2nd place previous. And then grade 8, we ranked 1st place. We were previously 2nd place. So our 3-8 overall math scores puts us at a ranking of 1st place in the county, which is, again, awesome.
I should clap again.
I know. I agree, Bass.
Since I did for ALA.
We should see lots of smiles around the table on these.
Can
Yeah.
you go back a slide or two just while we're here?
Here.
One more?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So we've got grade 8, Regents 8, and combined 8. And
I know you're gonna.
in my head here, I can do 44 plus 30 equals 74. So I could perhaps test at a level 1. But what's the breakdown there? So we have, Regents 8, meaning we have some 8th graders who are taking a Regents exam?
Correct. So those are
Okay.
the students who are taking algebra.
Got it. And they were 99%?
They were
3 or 4?
99%. So that's a
So-
really good question. So
Yeah.
our algebra students in 8th grade who are on our advanced track, we have 77 students in the 8th grade that did not take the Gen 8 exam. They took they took the algebra exam. Of those students, we had no one with a level 1, which you would hope because they're taking advanced. 1%, am I saying that correctly? Yes, 1 student had a level 2, no students had a level 3, and 76 of the 77 students received 99% for level 4 or above, so that's a 99% proficiency, which is outstanding.
Yeah,
And
that's
remember,
great.
this is the first year again of that new exam, so they did amazing.
Yeah, that's why I had the question. It kind of threw me off how the
Yeah.
grade was split into 2
Split in
different
half,
groups
yeah.
there, so.
And I'm not
Yeah.
really sure why they do that with 6 and 7 because there is really not an alternate exam for that, but you can see how they have
Sure.
it. It mirrors that except for 8th grade. It's different because the algebra breakout.
Great, thank
Okay?
you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we did this. Okay, Regents exam. So now we're going to switch up to the high school. Okay, just as a reminder, these are the exams that our students participate in. We have English Language Arts, Global History and Geography, U.S. History and Government, Earth Science, Biology, Chemistry, Physics, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. Okay, this is slightly different in terms of the levels. They rank it on a 1 through 5. So New York State considers level 3 and above as proficient. You'll see the score. So level 1 is the students who take it. If you got a level 1, you don't demonstrate the knowledge and skills, which means that you scored below a 55. Level 2 means you partially met the standards, and your range of your score would be 55 to 64, which means you did not pass that exam. Level 3 means you partially met the standards, 65 to 75 would be your score. Level 4, you've met the standard expectations with a score range of 76 to 84. And a level 5 is you have exceeded the standard expectations, and that's also a Mastery Honor Regents exam, which is 85 to 100. So you'll see here, this is our first exam. We're looking at the ELA Regents. So our district comparison against the state, we had 92% of our students have proficiency compared to 79% across the state of our students. And then you see the breakdown per each. Okay, the Algebra 1, this is the new exam. We had 93% of our students scoring the proficient. This includes our 8th grade students who took that exam, plus the students in 9th, and there are a few kids in 10th grade that take it, but it's 93% for us versus 62% in the state. And you want to see in the level 1s and 2, us lower. You want to see us higher on the right side. Geometry, just as a reminder, that was the last time we're administering that exam. This exam is new this year, 90% compared to 57% across the state. Algebra 2, 96% compared to 74% across the state. Okay, then we move into our sciences. We're in biology, where we have 86% proficiency compared to 62% across the state. Earth science, excuse me, 81% compared to 67%. Chemistry, it is closer, it's 77% compared to the 65% across the state. The majority of our students who took it received a level 3 on that exam. Physics, 79 compared to 74. We are still doing well. We're living in that 3-4 range, but you can see that that is a closer measure. So in social studies, we have global history and geography. We're at 95% proficiency compared to 77% across the state. U.S. history and government, we're at 92% proficiency compared to 78%. And then again, I gave you guys the breakdown. So they do the same in the report card as they do with the 3-8 measures, looking at each subgroup. And I'll just kind of talk a little bit about why that's important in just a minute. But if you look at the state report card, you can see for each exam that's listed that I just spoke to, you can break it down for every single one. So this is ELA. Specifically, you could pick any subgroup that you wanted to see how they're doing. You go across and you can see what levels each of our students scored, and then our proficiency. And then remember, this would not be, there's no refusal rate in here. The kids have to take it. Okay, and so that's noted for all of our exams. And then throughout for the rest of the regions. This is super important for us when we look at this. These subgroups is where we really dive in when we do our data, and I'll talk about that as we go through with areas of improvement and areas that we're doing well, because we need to know how each of our subgroups are doing and how we can meet their needs, and that's where the nitty-gritty work comes in, the analysis of when our teachers are working with administrators to, make plans for what's next. And then we have our countywide comparison. So you can see for ELA this year we ranked 4th. Global history we ranked 1st. U.S. history 4th. Earth science 6th. Biology we ranked 3rd. Chemistry 5th. We increased our scores in chemistry. Physics we increased our scores as well to 5th. Algebra 1 we're 1st. Geometry 3rd, and Algebra 2 we are 3rd. Okay, so this is the work part of what you guys just saw. This is so we continue to be super, super proud of all the work that's being done, of the success of our students. We're so appreciative of the day-to-day work that takes, and I always remind this time of year that what you guys see, this is one dipping point of how we're doing. It's certainly a good measure of how we're doing, but the day-to-day analysis of our students with the instruction that's being done, the assessments that are taking place, our data team meetings, that's where we really move the needle. In addition, when we get our results, taking those and breaking them down with the analysis of how the kids are doing percentage-wise based on each of the standards. That helps us design what we need to tweak and change in our curriculum to move the kids forward. Plus also look at like, hey, what are we doing really well? Let's make sure we're continuing to do that. So, and I also noted here, like, there are gaps, and we will talk more about that, but that's where, like, specific to special ed, ENL, our minority student population, like, how are we meeting those needs for each of our students as we progress throughout their curriculum? So the next couple of slides, there's a lot of information. You guys, like I said, you'll have this, but this is going to be kind of our key areas to focus, and then our areas that we're doing really well in. And this is how we grow as a district. It's certainly awesome. We sit here and we celebrate all the accomplishments, as we should, and the hard work that it takes to get the scores that I just showed you, but we're always looking to grow. So for ELA, grades 3 and 8, I'm sorry, grade 3 ELA and math, some areas that we need to focus on, you know, using key phrases in text. Kids at that age are having a hard time with literal and non-literal language. You know, they're in 3rd grade, so that's a hard concept for them. But some of our strength areas, they're doing a really nice job of pulling out key ideas and details. We've had our highest proficiency in 3 years above the state average in this particular area, so we're really proud about that. For math, for grade 3, we have found that we're having some challenges in those foundational concepts. You know, the good old multiplication and fraction. We have to look to reinforce those basic principles for our 3rd graders. So we're working on that, maybe using some more visual data to help the kids understand the concepts. For math, some areas we're doing really well is understanding fractions as numbers. So you may have recalled in the past, I've talked a lot about fractions are really tough for kids. Multi-step problems are tough. You're gonna see that rears its ugly head again here too, but we are making gains in fractions in general. Okay, grade 4 ELA areas to focus on. You're going to see that figurative language come again. You know, kids don't always understand that. Sometimes even when you're talking to them and you try to make a joke with them, they look at you like, what does that mean? I don't understand that. So now trying to put that into text structure is very difficult for some of our kids as they're moving across the upper elementary years. And then linking those visual elements to textual meaning is also a difficult concept. So our teachers are working to move the needle in that regard. Some strength areas, again, our kids are doing a really nice job analyzing those key ideas, structures, and then integrating the what they've learned into their text. Vocabulary skills, this is something I'm proud of too. We really tried to push this based on our some of our findings last year. Vocabulary was an area throughout that we didn't really do so great in, and so we're really trying to push that area. Grade 4 math, again, fractions are an area that we are continuing to, you know, learn and grow with. I mean, there's still times I struggle with fractions, I'll be honest. I mean, there's certain things that, you know, are difficult, and it's a little harder for some kids. So, and also interpreting the data with measurement, that's another area that we're working on. Kids are doing a really nice job in 4th grade math with operations, understanding factors and multiples. And then we're starting to get a stronger basis with geometry. So conversations from our high school math team was please work with our lower levels on some of those geometric concepts. And so we're looking to move forward with that. And I'm glad to see that that's a positive for this past year's exam. Grade 5, narrative writing, you know, incorporating those rich details into your writing, that's an area that we're working on with our students. And then on the other end, they're doing really well incorporating the figurative language and vocabulary. So now we're starting to see some of the areas that we were, you know, gaining that foundational 3-4. Now in 5th, it's starting to click more so for our students. Areas for math to focus with are those multi-step problems. You know, it does kind of show up across several standards for the exam, so we're going to hone in on that. Strength areas, operational fluency. Our kids are doing a really nice job with fluency, with decimals and whole numbers. Okay, grade 6. ELA, we're doing some work with that literary text and informational. You're going to see that throughout. It just kind of builds, you know, and so if we're having a gap in it on a lower level and it's not being addressed, it will continue. So we're working on that. Comprehension, analysis, and critical thinking, we're doing a really nice job with that for ELA. For math, we're going to look to improve some of our ordering and comparing rational numbers by incorporating more work with number lines. And then absolute value is starting to rear its head here in 6th grade, which is obviously a concept for later on harder math. And then some things we're doing well with math, algebraic skills. The kids are really getting a strong beginning basis of that and starting to apply it, as well as their geometry, again, is looking like it's improving on this level. Okay, grade 7, craft and structure is an area that we're working on. What's the author's purpose and so on, and how are we incorporating that into our writing? Good areas, key details, and integration of previous knowledge. So we've been hammering in the kids' heads since they walk in the door, you know, what is your previous knowledge for this? Because not every kid comes in with the same. So trying to get that even playing ground, and now by 7th grade, those kids are really starting to pull in life experiences into their writing, and so we're seeing that. Areas for math, multi-step problems, and then applying it to real life applications. So now it's, you know, the abstract to concrete, you know, how do you actually apply this to your day-to-day? Okay, and then in 8th grade, informational text, we're working on that. Again, kids analyzing relationships in informational text, pulling in those real life details. But areas that we're doing well is they seem to be able, they're doing a nice job between disciplines. So they're pulling in, again, what they know from their background, what they might have learned in a social studies unit, they're pulling it into their ELA. So kind of marrying the two, and then also increasing their vocabulary acquisition. That's a nice area of improvement. For math, grade 8, multi-step problems. We have a theme, so that's something we're definitely working on because that certainly builds into deeper understanding for algebra and geometry. And then for math, our strength areas that we're doing well with are expressions, equations, and algebraic reasoning skills. Okay. All right, Regents exams. I'm not going to read through all these. I'm just going to give you guys kind of the general. You can certainly read through it, but based on what I just did with 3-8, I'm kind of summarizing it for you. So areas of focus based on the exam percentages and the standards that the kids need to meet. We are working on vocabulary and language standards, authors, rhetoric, and structural analysis, and then craft and structure, you know, creating that really strong essay. Some areas of strength, though, analyzing a complex set of ideas or sequence of events, and then determining 2 or more central ideas, and then analyzing their development, and a lot of times then bringing it together where it's like a logical journey in the essay from the beginning to the end. Algebra 1, again, a new exam, but what we found, some areas to focus on is interpreting parameters in linear and exponential functions, understanding domain and the range as a function and a relationship, and then some strength areas. We found our kids were really engaged in this exam. So there were no non-response areas across the test, which is awesome. You don't usually see that. Good engagement, competency, and foundational skills. We found that the kids were really able to recognize properties of rational and irrational numbers, suggests that they've mastered those essential foundational skills. And then real world context problems. So, you know, what does this mean on the day-to-day, and how do you apply that in your everyday life? So the kids are doing really good with that. All right, geometry. Kids are struggling with abstract concepts, analytical geometry, and then applying the problems. But some strength areas is their proficiency in applying coordinate geometry techniques. It seems like they have a solid understanding of advanced trigonometry, and then reflecting their preparation from algebra and carrying it over into geometry. Okay, Algebra 2. And just as a reminder, we teach it Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, so this is in that sequence. Okay, complex quadratic solutions, exponential transformations, and conditional probability are all areas that we are continuing to work on our students with. Some strength areas, though, solving equations graphically, which I noted earlier, some of our kids were having a little bit of a struggle with that, so it's nice that as they're moving across, that is not an area of concern. Systems of equations and structure of expressions. Okay, biology. Some areas to focus, and just because it's up here doesn't mean like the kids are doing terrible in it. It just means that these are the areas when we pull the strands again. These were the percentage areas based on the standards, cross-correlated to the exam. This is what popped out. So molecular and cellular biology, reproductive, ecological, and evolution, and scientific context are areas that our biology teachers are focusing on. Whereas some strength areas are ecosystem interdependence, development and disease, and the immune system and homeostasis. During the COVID times, this was a very hot area that the kids were 100% interested in. Okay, earth science as we move here. This has been an area that we have continued to try to increase on is applying the math concepts to the scientific scenarios. So that's an area that we are falling a little bit below on, but our earth science teachers are working on that. And then the complex earth phenomena, which with our new science standards, everything is phenomena-based, so they've really been honing in on this. Strength areas is deductive and inductive reasoning, geologic history and plate tectonics, and then heat transfer and erosion. Those are areas that the kids are scoring well in within the exam. Chemistry, some areas of work that we have are potential energy diagrams, reduction of half reactions, and average atomic mass. But we are doing well with acidity and alkalinity, periodic table. We really start that early on in the kids' science world and continue to move that forward, and types of chemical reactions. Okay, in physics, some areas that our teachers are working with the kids on improving are mechanics, energy transformation, and experimentation and analysis. And our strength is momentum conservation, so recognizing that in closed system, weight and mass, and then problem solving and experimentation. The kids love doing the experiments. Okay, moving on to social studies. Almost done with this part of the presentation. So for global history too, we are doing very well, but we need some help with deeper contextual analysis. So having the kids analyze those historical events from different perspectives, and specifically as it relates to the Cold War and globalization, and then again making those connections throughout various content areas. But we are doing very well with interconnectedness and change, human rights and social justice, and then government and civics. For the U.S. history regions, essay writing across multiple standards. We spend a lot of time in our social studies classes having our kids expand their essay writing skills. I'm sure these ladies can attest to that. It feels like you're in another ELA class. But it's important because these are areas that we have to focus on. Now you have to pull all the information that you had, apply it across multiple contexts, and make it applicable to what's happening within your exam here. So the kids are having a hard time sometimes pulling that historical knowledge into the essay. I think it's more of a craft and structure piece, which we talked about earlier with ELA. But we are doing very well with certain aspects of World War II, specifically the impact of Pearl Harbor. The kids are all very interested in that. The executive order for Japanese removal and the contributions and challenges of minority groups. Those are all areas our kids are doing very well in. So just a reminder, our graduation rate is at 97%, which is fantastic, and we've maintained that percentage since 2022. And then just as we shift gears, so as I was doing this presentation, I also kind of wanted to give you guys just some, other things that are happening in the world of curriculum, because there's a lot that's happening in the world of curriculum. And there's a lot that we've been doing over the last, I'd say, 5 years that have brought us to where we are, but the state is also putting out new stuff that we're getting right behind and we're moving forward with. So I put this out here just as things for you guys to think on and perhaps presentations you want to see in the future, because each one of these slides is a pretty in-depth presentation. So K-12 science, there's been a lot of changes. You've heard me speak about a lot of the elementary changes. Now we're moving into the secondary world with what that means. So some areas that we could cover in those is, you know, how are we building phenomena-based science throughout our curriculum? What does an investigation mean versus what you might think like the typical science lab in a secondary world looks like? And then what does that look like in the grade 3, 4 through 8 world? And then we have changes throughout our secondary science. So biology, earth and space science, chemistry, physics, what are we doing to get ready for that? What have we done? You know, what are the preparation steps? And when are the next exams coming? Literacy, you know, we heard a lot of buzz last year about the science of reading, and I know there was some nervousness around that, but you know, I think it's important to understand what guided reading really looks like in an elementary classroom. Also, what are the components of a strong literacy block within an elementary classroom? We use F&P, which is Fountas and Pinnell. We have LLI, which is Leveled Literacy Intervention for our AIS teachers, and then Foundations, which is a phonetic-based for kindergarten to second grade. So how are these resources connected to the science reading? And then most recently, NYSED has released our P3 literacy briefs. So what's that all about? And I didn't add it in here, but how are we connecting it to pre-K? Because we can't forget about pre-K. Okay, and then a math pilot. Why are we looking at a new math program? What's the pilot process? What's the timeline? Who's involved? And the final steps. Again, open to any of these presentations. You guys want me to do them because each one of them is really important, and there's so much happening in curriculum right now that I think it's important for you all to be up to date on each one of these. SEL, so where are we with social and emotional learning? What's DBT, so dialectical behavior therapy, all about? And then what are the components of a DBT lesson for our students? Mr. DeBold and his team have done a lot of work with this, and Ms. Triasi. And then lastly, portrait of a graduate. So what does this mean? I know there was some, you know, conversations about this earlier this year. When does New York State propose that these changes take place? What planning will need to happen? And does this mean regents will no longer be required to graduate? And if so, what exams will we have? And I will share with you that many of this is to be determined on this slide. Okay, so right now, like I said, this presentation is live on my webpage. The link is right there, but I will take any questions you might have.
Thank you for the great presentation. I'm glad to see again excellent results here. Kudos for all the teachers and the administration. I have a question about upon request, who's to request?
You can request to me, you can request to Mr. Dade, you can request to Jim. You're welcome.
Yeah, so maybe just for that, I'm seeing 3 or 4 slides here, Megan, that you said, hey, if we want to hear about
Yeah.
K through 8 math, or K through 4 literacy, et cetera, it's probably best to just have everybody email that to me, what we'd like to see a future presentation on. That I think will be the cleanest way to do it.
And each one won't be as, this is the longest presentation of the year. I promise you the others won't be as long.
Yeah. Eleanor, I believe, was next.
First of all, congratulations. The test results were wonderful. Congratulations to our teachers for all the hard work that they put in. I noticed that the AP scores weren't included in this.
Yeah, you are correct. And yes,
Is it
there's no other reason than just,
Yeah, is it possible
forgot.
to get those at some
yeah,
point?
yeah, I can
great.
definitely have those for you.
right.
And last year I had them in there, and yeah, you're right.
Slipping them up.
Yeah, yeah, I can work on those, and I'll share them out with you guys this week.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Tiffany?
Megan, great job. Thank you so much for that. Couple of questions. The 8th grade opt-out rate for math seemed to be significantly higher in the other grades. Would that be attributed at all to the students taking the advanced/regions who opt out of the regular? Or did I misread that?
Let me see here.
That's okay. You can email it to us if you don't
okay.
have it at your fingertips.
So, okay, so grade 8 math, let's just take a peek at this. So we have all of our students, so we have 259 students, 115 were tested. So you are correct. It appears as though there's more, but remember, part of the grade is taking Algebra 1.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah,
We can
yes,
attribute that
correct.
to, I mean, I know my own daughter didn't take the
Right.
8th grade because she took the Regents, so
So
I'm
she takes
thinking
that.
the opt-out looks
Yep,
high, but really
correct.
because a chunk of the students
Yep.
are in.
I
Okay.
mean, there were kids that opted out, but
Of
that's
course,
not.
but it's not, that number's not as
No.
high as it appears based on
No.
that. Also, I just wanted to make a comment on the strength areas and the key focus areas on the Global History 2 regions. Strength areas are evident in topics on atrocities and human rights and principles, and we need to work on encouraging students to analyze historical events from multiple perspectives, particularly in underperforming areas like the Cold War and globalization. And then also on the slide regarding the U.S. history regions, it says about the one of our strength areas is questions related to President Roosevelt's executive order, implications, et cetera, impact of Pearl Harbor internment. I just want to just comment that I just hope that that deficiency is not occurring. I'm very proud of our teachers and proud of the education that my child receives in the Cornwall Central School District, but I would just hope that there's not political ideology being imposed upon our children in any way where they're learning this social activism as opposed to critical thinking in any area. I'm not looking for an answer. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Brendan.
Thanks. Thank you for all the work that went into it, and of course, all the work that everyone involved in this district went into creating these numbers. It's always great to see. It's great to see some of those improvements over previous years. Just a few questions. I want to start just by defining terms. I know in previous years this has been discussed. We have the comparisons to the state and then also to the county. But when it comes to proficiency and above proficiency, those aren't relative terms. Those are absolute terms, right? Like you're either proficient or you're not. It's not graded on a curve.
No, yeah, so that's what the stake is. You're proficient or you're not. So it's a 3 or a 4 for 3-8, and it's a 3 or higher for regions, proficient levels.
Great. One thing that jumped out was I'll go back to the relative numbers drop for 5th grade, both in ELA and in math, and both did well generally, but not as well as the 1st through 4th and then 6th through 8th. And I wonder if you have any other thoughts behind that. I know in our district, anytime 5th grade is an outlier for any reason, the first thought is, well, it's because we send them to the middle school. That seems like an easy answer, but I'm just curious if you have any other thoughts about that.
No, I mean, the only thing I can say is I just think that it's a big learning year for the kids, so it's your first year in middle school. It's your first year kind of going through that. Now, it's not their first year taking the exams, but it's your first year in 5th grade, because you're right, like 4th grade they are doing well, and then 6th grade, 7th grade, but there are like gaps in different areas within those worlds, and you do kind of see the divides of who the kids who start to do a little bit better in like ELA and social studies versus science and math. So I can only attribute it to, I don't think it's any lack of preparedness. I think it's just more of the kids, their ability to be able to do it at that point, because there's just so much going on. It's a big growth year for them. Yeah.
I just want to say 2 more things. One quickly, I like how you're tracking performance at the higher levels with changes at the lower levels. I know I see that just in my own kids. I'm kind of stunned sometimes that they're learning geometry concepts, et cetera, so early. So I would be interested to see in a few years how all of that stuff pays off. And for anybody that is interested in this, I think that's an incredibly daunting task to keep track of all this for years. But I think that's where you see the results. Yeah. It's not just year to year. It's but kind of like as the cohort moves through.
Where are the trends?
Yeah. And if I may, Tiffany pointed out something very granular, so I'm going to point out something very granular. It was in the, and this is just I don't know, maybe there's a million things in here and they're all important, but perhaps this is just a pet issue of mine. But you point out, and it's very helpful, about informational texts, that they consistently perform better on literary than informational, and absolutely I'm all for informational proficiency increasing, but not at the expense of literary understanding. I know that it's only so many hours in the day, but again, that's just me throwing out my personal issues onto the presentation. But yeah, I would just love to see the appreciation for long form text to not go by the wayside. But overall, again, thank you so much. The work on this presentation sounds like it must have taken you all year, so I appreciate it.
Takes a minute.
Christian.
Okay, so some of these are just questions for more information at a later time, and if you could get back to me in observation. And but let me start with the one that Mr. Carty brought up, which is grade 5. And this is not in your presentation, but when I pull out the data and I track cohorts, which means the same students as they go grade by grade proficiency, you can see a clear dip in grade 5, and that's for 10 cohorts over a long period of time. So that's not because that was the COVID year or that was something else happening. And I think that means we might need to pay more attention to providing more support to that. And what that answer is, I think, is a bigger question, but I share that concern. The second thing is that I'd be interested in seeing what percentage of our high school students are taking the second and third tier regions. And what I mean by that is I presume most students, if not all students, are taking the Algebra 1 regions, but probably not as many are taking the Algebra 2 regions. And so there's kind of a winnowing effect, and therefore when we're looking at the overall performance, we're not looking at the same population, because the ones at the Algebra 2 are presumably the ones who did best in Algebra 1. And so what you're seeing is, yes, they're going to do better because you're not looking at the same population. So I'd kind of be interested in seeing what that looks like in the math sequence, and then also in the science sequence, meaning earth science and living environment, or maybe or earth and space science, and compared to chemistry and physics. And I would just be interested to see that data if you have it at some point.
I mean, so basically you're asking so there's required regions, required math, required science, versus what kids then choose to expand on. We can see what we have for that.
Okay. And then just year over year. And while I share that we're doing well, when I look at, and I realize this is a different test and different standards, but we're basically comparing proficiency bands. So if I look at year over year, comparing same grades, we're down in 4 grades, up in 2 grades, and overall down in overall proficiency from 20, and I don't think this reflects on any teachers or anything, but basically you have these things where some are going up, some are going down. It looks more like a push to me, and that just struck me that I'm trying to make sense of why those patterns are. And as I said before, I try to track the same students as they go through grades, because it might be that one grade is just has a different mix of students, and therefore it does better, not because of anything we're doing, but just because the mix of students has changed year from year. And I kind of like to see that. I would like to see that broken out. I'll probably do it myself, but I'd be interested to see what the pattern is when I kind of take it out of just comparing of just grade to grade, because this year's 5th graders are obviously not last year's 5th graders. And so maybe maybe that's not really telling us as much as we like.
Which is why those subgroups are important, and also, kids come in and out of district every year within each grade, so that's tough data to extract, but it's a good point.
Great. Does anybody else have questions?
I do just want to make a comment on the regions. We're all kind of in this holding phase of, with bated breath, wondering where the state is going to go on that. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind, as well as we're thinking of how many students are taking which regions and things of that nature. Talking with my own son, who's an 11th grader. Even in other states, you can get an advanced diploma or a regular diploma, and that dictates which students are taking which exam. So it's, in my opinion, this is just me speaking as a dad, it's skewed based on the track that your child is on, and every district looks different based on kind of what that philosophy is, even state by state, with regards to advanced diplomas and and the like, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with Regents. And then the other, I love the conversation around fifth grade. For me, I'm with Christian on this, with wherever the transition is. So high school, there's tons of programs and funding and energy put into that ninth grade year because it's such a big transition year. Some high schools have ninth grade academies just to make it smaller and things of that nature. I think our fifth grade does a great job of making that fifth grade experience as easy as possible going to the middle school. But all that to say, I just wonder if we were to compare our fifth grade dip with other districts' sixth grade dip. So I'll put money on it that anytime you have that transition year, you're going to see that dip most likely. So I just wonder how our fifth grade transition would track with other districts who are transitioning at sixth grade. So great questions, and I think that's what our teachers and department chairs and administrators do a great job of trying to get to the why. But these are great questions for us to ponder as we look to the years ahead.
Thanks, Terry. So I'm going to close it out. I've got a couple of questions / comments kind of dovetailing with some of the other folks say. So, one thing I think we've seen before, and you didn't have today, but is really sort of how our district compares to the state in a percentile ranking. And I don't know, I think there's a paper at Syracuse that publishes it every year, and I was looking through it, and for most of the 3 through 8 there, we were in the top 10% of New York State. So echo the sentiments of everybody at the table that we have a very strong academic district, and every year I appreciate that you and building administrators and department chairs and individual teachers really take a hard look at those, hey, here's where we're strong and here's where we're weak, and really looking to continually improve. It's really hard to get from top 9% to top 6% to top, but I appreciate the effort that our staff in this district takes to continually improve and get there. And I'll echo Brendan's sentiment that one thing that really caught my ear in talking is saying, okay, we've got a problem in high school math on one issue, and they're filtering that down to the middle school and the later grades in elementary, trying to improve that proficiency from the bottom up, which is great. And I had a question similar to Christian's about the different tracks. Like, I would assume that chemistry and physics is not, like, how many regents are required to graduate versus, I would assume, some of the upper math and that chemistry and physics. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I would assume that not everybody has to take physics.
Right. No.
Yeah.
And so I took it down, but I forget what we had. I mean, the percentage of kids who take that compared to, say, an earth science or a biology, which is required, it's much less. Because remember, too, then kids also jump onto that AP track. So they might be taking an AP Chem or an AP Physics. So yes, Regents is an option, but a lot of the kids jump because they're taking the accelerated courses onto the AP world or a college level class so they can get those credits going into college.
So if you were taking, for example, an AP Chemistry or an AP Physics, you do not have to take the Regents exam? You can just
No,
take
you can
only
take
the
the
AP test?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would certainly, explain a lot, that someone that would be, obviously, if you're taking the AP Chemistry exam, for example,
Right.
you would do pretty well on the
But
Regents
most
exam.
kids have taken prior to that the chemistry exam,
Right.
and then they take AP Chem the next year.
Okay.
So it's very rare that a kid would not take chemistry prior, so they've taken the Regents, and now they're going to take
Okay.
the AP Chem.
Got it.
Macon, if I could just clarify something
Yeah.
you said. So what you're saying is they might take Regents chemistry or, and then they'll take AP chemistry as a second course.
Correct. Yeah, a lot of kids will take advanced chemistry, right, accelerated chemistry, and then the next year they'll take AP Chem. Both my kids did that, so that way,
Yeah.
you did well in it. Why wouldn't you take it the next year and get the AP credit for it?
Great, yeah. So maybe just as a follow-up to the board, if you could just email what Regents are mandatory
Sure.
and what Regents
Yeah.
are optional, as we look at
Yeah.
that data, I think it'd be helpful
got it.
information. But, overall, I echo the sentiments of, we're a very high-performing district, and I appreciate the steps that we continually take to improve that even more. So, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next item is our consent agenda. The use of the consent agenda permits the Board of Education to make more effective use of its time by adopting a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters which are included Any member of the board who wishes to discuss individually a particular piece of business in the consent agenda may so indicate, and that item will be considered and voted on separately. Can I have a motion on items 2 through 25? So moved. Do we have a second? Second from Eleonora. And then who would like to pull any of the numbered items here in our consent agenda? Anybody? I'd like to pull number 6. Just have a clarifying question on the pre-ref architecture contract. So hearing nothing else, we will take a vote. Yes?
Rather than pull all the text or priority ones, like pull one, my point is not about that particular one, but overall, any clarification about text or priority.
Yes, it appears that to me that number 8 is the first, so we'll just pull number 8. I take, okay.
Pull 25 just because then we don't have to cut the motion up.
So let's do this. Let's take number 8 first and ask your question, and then we'll go back and vote, and then we'll talk about it.
I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
I will withdraw my request and not ask to pull any of them.
Okay. So let's take a vote then on number 2 through 5 and 7 through 25. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing no opposed. Any abstentions? Seeing no abstentions. My question on number 6, it's just a pre-referendum work for our Tetra Tech, for our architecture firm. And this question is for Terry or for John. I didn't see an overall dollar amount here. Is this just billed hourly? I saw the rate schedule at the end.
That's correct. Yep.
Great. Easy enough. Any other questions on number 6? Okay, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, the next item on our agenda, a lot of pages to flip through here. Thank you. Old business, polling place discussion. The board was circulated a memo put together by Mr. Fink in conjunction, or working with the Orange County Board of Elections on some of the options with the iPads for voting. So John, maybe if you just want to give us a brief walkthrough there to make sure we're all comparing the same numbers for discussion.
Sure. Couple different options. We have the status quo budget vote option at the middle school with the costs associated with that. Then the board was looking at adding in an additional site. So we gave a cost associated with adding in that additional site. And if we were to do that additional site kind of under the status quo method, we use poll books. So we would have to separate the district out, really. The district would need to be divided. Where would that division in the district be? How would we decide that? Where would it go? Where would be that second location? So then we looked at going with an iPad sign-in. Many people are familiar with that. The company that does that is NTS. They can move us over to that. There are costs associated with doing the iPad sign-in. However, it is BOCES aidable. And they broke out the costs and whether we want to do a 4 iPad approach or a 6 iPad approach. They felt 4 was sufficient for the number of voters that we have in the district. And some of the keys there were, do we want to go with one polling location, continue at the middle school, or if we add the second location, you're looking at potentially keeping the same amount of iPads, 4 iPads or 6 iPads. You're just going to go 2 at each location or 3 at each location. Costs increase. But again, you could have the district selected as one site with 2 locations, or you can break the district up into 2 separate sites. So some key language there. Really, the question is what are we looking to accomplish by this process? What data are we looking at? Particularly when we have, I think it's over 13,000 registered voters in the district with about 2,000 voting for a budget vote.
So, and I just want to make sure that I understood, you provided a table here with a lot of data. As we look at the iPad options, you've got a total cost in year 1, a total cost in year 2, and then a reimbursable cost. Is that reimbursable cost the cost after BOCES reimbursement? So that's the all-in number to look at, or do I need to do some subtraction?
So that's the all-in cost, but it comes a year later, BOCES reimbursement, so you
Right.
have to outlay the full cost up front and then get reimbursed a year later.
So just for those in the audience who don't have the numbers in front of them, just some quick numbers here. If we do it as we have done it in the past with the polling books at one location, it's $17,300 a year. 4 iPads at one location, the total cost is $47,800 in year one, but that after the reimbursement is $25,000. So $7,000 or $8,000 more. Year two, that reimbursable cost goes down to 23. That's some of those initial software startup costs. So really not, from 17,000 up to 23 for one location, not a super significant jump, $6,000. And then if we were to do 2 polling locations, that year two reimbursable cost would be $34,100. So about double from 17 to 34. So to go with 4 iPads, and that I assume means 4 iPads at each polling location.
No, 4 iPads total, 2 in each location.
Okay. Do we think that's enough?
Again, NTS felt that was enough.
Okay.
But again, you wanted to make a decision about convenience of sign-in, right? Your times when your registered voters are probably early in the morning or late at night. People are then trickling in throughout the day. This is just kind of ballpark estimates of what most budget votes look like. And those busier times are when you want to move that convenience of people through those lines.
Great.
That was why the 4 iPad versus the 6 iPad was expanded.
And the 6 iPad number, so after reimbursement in year two, the 4 iPads is $34,100 and 6 iPads is $35,300. So only an additional $1,200. So, for the 2 iPads. So there may, I assume if you go to 8, it would be
Keep going up a
similar
little bit,
increase. Yeah, a couple grand more. Great. So, really I open it for discussion. I guess I will just say, if we want to, as a board, think about 2 polling locations, I would say that's locking us into the iPads, because if we were to say that we need to split our district into polling districts, it's going to cause confusion, and you're going to have people show up at the middle school and go, no, you can't vote here. You have to go to the high school and vote, and that's going to create a problem. So I think that would be a pretty awful idea. So to me, the discussion is, do we do the way that we have been doing it? Do we add iPads to one polling place, test that out, see how it goes, see the data there, and then make a decision further on down the line in the 2 polling places? Or do we think that 2 polling places is important? So I leave the floor open to discussion. Anyone?
I'll start by just addressing what I think the true options are. I agree that having 2 polling places, but do it with hand sign-in, I mean, the cost that's not on there would be educating people about where they have to go, which I don't know if a dollar figure could truly capture how much of a pain in the butt that would be. So I think the real option, the 2 options are status quo or iPad for both, because to me, I mean, I understand the iPad solves the convenience problem, but it would really just be solving the problem of getting people to, I would assume, anyway, that we would allow people then to go to either location, because you can only sign in once, right? So it would be a way of resolving that other problem. Again, so that's, what the numbers there would be 17,000 versus, I don't have it the second, but 58, I think, was it?
58 before BOCES reimbursement,
Yeah,
so after
58 this year.
reimbursement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, let's find that table. Yeah, I mean, it would be 58 before reimbursement and then 35 after the reimbursement comes in. Yeah, I think there's a middle ground argument to be made, to piggyback on your point of switch to the iPads this year at one polling location, because I think one of the questions really raised was, are we seeing proper, not proper, but are we seeing the right geographic representation in the people who vote versus the people who live in the district. And I kind of that was the question I asked myself, because Christian, you had talked about where Board of Ed members who are elected, where they came from and what that breakdown was. And that's because you didn't have the information on where people voted, and you didn't have that information because if you went to go get it, you would be directed to the basement and you would get a banker's box with 8 books, and you would have to manually go through the 12,000 registered voters and write down who voted and where they lived. And at that point, I gave up on that effort. So I think there's a case to be made to switching to the iPads, leaving one location, analyzing the data, and then having the discussion on, are we trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, or are we seeing a disproportionate representation, geographically speaking? Christian? Oh.
So 4 points. And the first one I think is that I think we're framing the choices. I would frame it differently. I think if there's two locations, it's CMS and CCHS. If it's one location at the high school because that is the most centrally located, both by the population distribution and also just the straight line distance for most of the residents in the district. And so I think that's the basic choice that we're facing. The second one is, and this really confuses me because I'm not sure why you're talking to the County Board of Elections, because they don't supervise or govern or regulate school board elections. And without getting into all the details about what that means, I'm just going to read one sentence from Elizabeth's summary about the annual meeting and election logistics, and this is the first line: law governing school district elections. In general, the education law governs school district meetings and elections, not the election law. And so you're talking to someone and you're creating a requirement that would be required for a general election, but is actually not required for school board elections because the legal framework of it is actually a meeting. We could have the budget vote by a voice vote in one room, and people did, and that actually would be still allowed in New York State. We could do it with just paper ballots. This means here's a paper ballot, there's some minute education law about how the paper ballot has to be structured, but it is not the standard that the ballot, for example, in a general election has to follow. So there's a lot of differences between that, and you can see that from the candidate petitions, which would never conform to the level that petitions have to do for any other candidate in any other office. Most obviously is that you can't sign your own petition if you're running for any other office. You can do that on a school board, and Harvey Sotland confirmed that to me when I submitted my own. And there's no attestation and things of that sort because the standard in education law is that it is a meeting, and you can look at the language of every resolution we pass each year. And that meeting, as every commissioner decision on every single impropriety about elections, it says there's a rebuttable presumption of regularity, which means that it would have to be egregious, and therefore fraud is not, let's say, a consideration. And so just to give you one example, in 1995, in Valley Central, just under 700 people voted that were not in their poll book. This was appealed to the commissioner, and the commissioner says it doesn't matter because they were actually registered. And therefore, there's no difference, and it did not have any substantial impact. And therefore, individual cases of fraud, even when they grant the facts of those individual cases, have not been a cause to impeach the election, because just like we have a meeting here, we could, let's say, conduct our votes, the 9 of us, through an electronic device, and we could decide that it would probably be uneconomical, but that's more or less the type of vote we're taking. The same type of vote, it's more akin to, let's say, a shareholders meeting or to a condo board meeting where you have an annual meeting. And so that is why the election law standard, particularly the idea that you need to divide into districts and therefore they require a different poll book, the poll book doesn't serve the same function. It's more or less a sign-in sheet for school board elections, and that's pretty clear. And I don't want to, I've read all the education law governing elections in the last few days, and if you could show me where it says that you require a separate poll book for different sites, I would be interested. And then, because we don't necessarily have to go to the minimum standard, we could say, well, we were really concerned about fraud. But we should look at what the data says, or in the last 30 years, there have been just about, depending on how you classify it, 30 cases of school board elections being appealed to the education commissioner. And at the same time, we've had 20,000 school board elections, not including second elections, meaning like re-elections, meaning when a budget fails, or when there's been a separate bond vote, which means the allegations of failure, allegations of fraud is approximately 1/6 of 1%. And that's, of those allegations, only one of them actually led to any action, which would be 1/200th of 1%. And so that seems to be a relatively infinitesimal possibility to consider when we're not required to do it, and that increases the cost dramatically. I should also add that if you look at our own regulation, in our own policies, 2120.2, where we have a policy about voting procedures, it allows us to do paper ballots. It also says we have to be able to walk into the machines. And if you've ever seen the polling machines, I don't think any one of us could actually walk into the machine. And it's because the machines are the old hand crank machines where you go behind a curtain, you pull the crank. Maybe, Richard, you have not experienced this, but I think all the older ones, you probably voted on one of those machines. And actually, there's specific legislation, the education law, saying we can use that machine, and even if we use it, we don't actually have to maintain it or actually ensure that it operates properly. There was an exception specifically for that in 2014, which would all indicate the intent is that we're not going to the same standard about fraud. So I have some other points about how we could solve the problem of dividing the district, because I know what the numbers are, and because districts have done this with indicating, it actually can be done for the cost of updating a web page. Because what you can do is what Newburgh does, and allocate electoral districts, and then test a link to the New York State voter lookup, and that would show them, and you could just put that into the budget bulletin, which is what Wappingers that operates 6 sites, or Newburgh that operates 12 sites does currently. So I don't think this is a really huge logistical problem, because many districts already do it and found ways, and Wappingers doesn't just New York State lookup, they use NTS's voter information portal, which I presume would cost money, but I think there's a free way to do it.
Tiffany?
So team, we're creating a problem that doesn't exist, though it would be nice to have a second polling site or a different polling site, and I value and respect everything that you had to say, Christian. I think at this time, it's just not a fiscal priority for us. I believe that every person that should or can vote should go and exercise that valuable right. I think it will create confusion, and to Brendan's point, where do we put the dollar amount on people being confused on where to go, or they didn't go to the right place and being turned away? I just think we have greater priorities right now where to spend our money. I mean, we spent a couple months arguing over a smaller amount of money on upgrading our scoreboard. This is a problem that we don't have. It would be nice, but it's not a problem. People can drive one time per year in nice spring weather, not in the middle of winter, 5 or 6 miles. Is it ideal? No, of course not. Is it the most convenient? Of course not. But right now, our priorities are getting our teacher contracts done. I'd rather see the money go there, getting our upcoming negotiations, getting our capital projects that are underway, and we might have another one. I just think we need to focus our priorities and perhaps revisit this issue in a couple years when our contract negotiations and our capital projects are behind us.
Thank you.
I just wanted to location-wise, I just want to state I strongly, emphatically say CCHS is off the table. I have no idea how you run an election with community lunch and everything going on, so I get really just uncomfortable with 2 sites. I think we would be looking at shutting down the district and making it a teacher workday or something of that nature, but for me, I cannot see CCHS being an option for this year for a myriad of reasons that I would not be able to look parents or staff in the eye and say that we would be able to solve in such a short runway.
Thank you, Terry. Bass?
Yeah, thanks. I struggled with this whole proposal from the very beginning, and I'm going to repeat myself today. I know, people seek everything that is convenient, but what I'm struggling with, how the kids of that family who would vote go to the school where the vote takes place for a whole school year. And you know, I mean, I have kids in the district. I mean, one day one kid is sick, I have to go take them out. Sometimes they have dentist appointment, take them out, return. So you do this whole thing. You're not detached from the school where the vote takes place for a whole year. And for one day when you have to vote, if you decide to vote, many people don't vote. But if you want to vote, is that too much to ask to go to that school? I struggle with this idea from the beginning, and I'm still struggling with it.
Thank you, Bass. Richard?
Thank you. So I'm not going to repeat what others have said. I think everyone knows my position on this. I still think we should explore 2 polling sites. I don't think you could put a dollar sign or figure on voter accessibility. We don't have specific data to back my claim up that I think voter turnout is lower on the west side of the district. But through living there, talking to people, I think it's a very educated guess of mine that not as many people from that side of the district vote. It's really just common sense because they live 5-6 miles away compared to people that live in the village or the town. It takes them 2 minutes to drive there. So the bottom line for me, I still think we should explore a second polling site. And I know, Bass, you brought up how do their kids get to school. It's not just parents that vote. It's senior citizens. It's those without kids. And I think those are the ones that really make a difference in budget votes because a lot of people that don't have kids do support our schools. And when we're looking at capital projects in the future, having second capital projects, I think starting to have more accessible polling sites would help us because people that live in the reserve and live in New Windsor, they do support our schools and they're moving here. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Carl, Eleonora, we haven't heard from you. Any comments, thoughts?
I mean, I guess the only thing I'd like to add is everyone has made their argument and their case. 2 polling places would be convenient because we do have a large population on the other side of town. I do agree with Tiffany that we have a lot of things we need to finance, facilities that need to be repaired. We have contracts coming up that need to be addressed. So we have to take all of those factors into account. I just wanted to comment on something that Terry had said because it's been weighing on me for years. You're right, it would be a logistical nightmare, you know, especially with community lunch. But I've always been concerned with the middle school, even the flow of people going in and out voting during the school day. So, I mean, that might be something we might want to talk about as well, because everybody just walks into the building and kids are walking in the halls and, you know, just something we might want to discuss. That's my 2 cents.
As you know, I have a daughter at the middle school, so, you know, her safety's paramount along with everyone else's. But my concern with spreading it to another district school is we have so many security personnel, coordination with Cornwall PD, monitors. Everyone is focused on making sure that flow goes directly to the gymnasium and right back out. So we put the additional personnel there. I get concerned about what that looks like with double the location, so.
Christian, and if I could ask you, you know, I listened to your comment, and to be honest with you, the one real concrete proposal that I heard from you in your comment previously was that you would prefer that if we have one location, it moves to the high school versus the middle school. Because I don't think you're proposing that we have a voice vote, and I don't think you're proposing that we go back to paper ballots, and I don't think you're proposing that we find a butterfly mechanism voting machine. I understand your point that, you know, those are technically allowed by the law, but I don't think you're advocating for that. So for my clarification, I'd like to know what you would propose that we do as a district.
So I think I put it as two choices, and that's, I think, is, and I'm sorry if I was not clear, that if we have two sites, what those two sites are, and that's questioned, but if we can't have two sites because of economy reasons or otherwise, I think there's a clear preference to have the one that reduces the distance for all voters in the district, both because of where the population is distributed and because of where the actual straight line distance to the polling site is. And with the logistics, in our proposed list of capital, for our next capital project, is the traffic because of the traffic congestion at CCMS. We don't have necessarily a similar one for CCHS. So if we're talking about disruption and things of that sort, I mean, one school versus one school, someone's gonna get disrupted if we have it at a school. It's about the same, I'm not sure. I think you probably lost more instructional time in terms of total time just by moving to a drop rotation schedule. I mean, just in terms of number of hours that we're seeing kids less in classes or instructional time facing. And so what I guess someone is saying that is like, if there's one school, it should be at the central, if there's one polling site, it should be at a central location and the most central location available to us. And so my point is that this is kind of a two choice. The first one is, should we have two or one? And if we have one, I'm not sure it should be at the same. When I wasn't the original one to propose the second polling site, but the reason why I would support tooling polling sites, because it's not geared at taking away someone's preferred polling site, but being fair to an equal number of people who are also members of our district. And so that's my proposal. I have another comment, but I'll stop there if it's clear what I am proposing.
So you're proposing, your preference is to have two, and if we only have one, that'd be the high school.
Yes, and I think that for the reasons that I stated.
So let's tease out, you think it's okay to have the printed books if we have to and not split into electoral districts, or you think splitting into electoral districts is
So you're not necessarily having, I mean, I could go into the logistics and details. My reading of the law, and I'm not an election lawyer, but there's nothing in there about creating a second polling book for a second district in the education law that governs this. And there are a lot of specifics, things about the nature of the ballot, the setup, the machines you're allowed to use, and so my point about that is, if you've seen that, maybe you're reading more carefully than me, but I'm not seeing that. It is in the election law, which means for New York State, it is not in the education law. And my reason to bring up those other examples is that those suggest that there's not that kind of requirement for school board elections because it's within a different legal framework than the general elections, even though we think of it as an election. That is not how it's cast, and that affects how the law governs it. Anyway, so but the point is, like, I think my preference would be for two because I think it's worth it. But if people feel that it's not worth it, I think there's another consideration, which is what is fairest for all of the residents of our district, and that means it would be one site but at a different location. I'm sorry, I was trying to be clear about it because it seemed it wasn't clear before.
Yeah, but again, so I see you, Carl. I'm going to come to you next. I mean, so what I'm hearing from you now is you think the polling books are not necessary, so we would just have the polling books at one location and not a second location?
Well, we would do exactly what we're doing now, and just in a sense, same cost, different location. It wouldn't be any increase in cost, and we have to have an election anyway, so those costs are baked in.
That's if we move it to the high school. I'm talking about a two-location scenario.
So I think the law is silent on this. There's nothing that seems to be requiring that, and there's nothing that seems to be forbidding that. I could tell you how I would probably do it if I was running it, which is I would run a polling book and I would split the district, where I would put New Windsor, Woodbury, and Cornwall electoral districts 6, 3, and 11, which is basically everything west of 9W.
So you'd split into two districts.
And that splits roughly the population to 6,500 in both ones, so it's nice and balanced. It also makes it easy to tell people where to go, because then you can use the New York State voter lookup, which would tell you what district you are in simply by going to the link. And therefore, that would handle the point. To cover the fact that people might go to different polling sites, you can have a complete polling thing, or you can have people who are not in that district cast a provisional ballot hold them aside and only count them if it would affect the outcome of the election, and then you can decide to count them. And that would create the problem of this double voting that was brought up in the memo. So, I mean, this is a problem that happens, and that's how
Yeah,
they
no, I
address it.
understand. So just so we're clear, you would propose splitting into two different districts for voting, and you would have to go to a specific polling place and printing the paper books of the appropriate voters for each location.
If you want, I don't think you need to split the district. I just think if you do that, that's how you do it. I think you could have two sites and a choice of polling site.
So if you don't,
I'm not going to be doctrinaire about this because
So
if
if you don't-
people see that it's confusing, I wouldn't insist on it.
so if you don't split the district into two different, an A and a B for voting, you would advocate what in terms of the books, the iPads?
I think the iPads are a nice little gimmick, but I don't think they're necessary, and I think you can do it without the iPads. I'm convinced.
How? Specifically, how is the point I'm trying to get?
So you have
So you would print polling books for, so let's just say there's 12,000 voters, you would print the 12,000 voters and have those books at the middle school and have those books at the high school for the same 12,000
I'm
voters?
sorry, I suddenly whispered in my ear and I lost what you were saying. I apologize.
So you would print the 12,000 voters and have the 12,000 voters at the middle school and the 12,000 voters at the high school, and they would sign the book where they showed up. Is that what you're saying?
Separate by where they live.
I think what I would do is I would have the two halves, and there'd be one polling book. So there'd be two polling books that would cover the 65, one for the 6,500 in one district, and 6,500 in the other district, and that if they don't match, like i.e. I come to a different polling site that I'm not assigned to, you have them as cast a provisional ballot, you put it in a manila envelope, or you seal it just like you do with an absentee ballot, and then you count those last, and they're only, if they're decisive, which is how the commissioner has generally ruled on this, do they actually get counted? And then you can therefore check against the other book to see that there's no double counting.
I would just say that that is so convoluted, confusing, and chaotic. I appreciate it, and I know it can be done, but it's just not reasonable or something we should ever consider doing.
I do have to agree there. If we are gonna do the two polling places, I think the easiest thing is the iPads, because then it would have the signatures, correct? Am I
Yes.
understanding that correctly?
Yes.
So then if someone tries to go to a different, it's already signed.
Correct.
Right, I think it would get very confusing with the books.
And then we're back to cost.
Yes.
To have iPads at all
So-
places.
Yeah, I agree with the folks that say if we do two polling places, we need the iPads. To your point, Christian, is it legally required? No. But I think it would be important for, the confidence of the voter to say, hey, we're not having fraud in this election. And certainly, not to get into national politics, because it really doesn't have any place in this, but obviously, it's been an issue that we've heard about in the last several years. So I just don't think that's an avenue that we want to introduce. So, what is the bare minimum legal standard? I don't know necessarily has any bearing. So I guess the question is, I think there's general consensus looking around that if we do two places, we should do the iPads. So I guess let's just take a little, maybe a straw poll here.
I know, for me, I'm just, I agree with Richie, for several reasons that why we should have two different places. I don't want to get into all of them today, but, we can talk down the road. There's physical, some of it could be physical reasons why people can't come into the places we're having them at right now. And more so, though, is that, like Richie was bringing up, the people on the other side, they don't come out here to vote because one of the reasons is you can't even find a place to park in here half the time. So there's a lot for me, but I agree with what Richie and Chris had brought up.
Okay, so let's take a little, we don't have a motion here, this is just a discussion.
Can I add one to the vote? Is your suggestion of one iPad to collect information this year? I mean, I'm hearing a lot of anecdotal reason why we might need a second polling location, but several people have made this point. Now, we're not quite sure if this is a problem, so using 1 year to diagnose that seems to me like the most viable, or at least the wisest option. if
Yeah.
we're gonna consider anything other than the status quo.
I agree with
Are you
that.
saying use the iPad?
Use the iPad at one
So we
location this year
can-
so you can
so
see.
we can see.
Is there a gap? Are there people that are unrepresented at the polls? And then next year, because what's also occurring to me is like, man, it's getting kind of late in the game to like totally be changing the way we vote as a district. So yeah, that either we just keep it as is, or we use this year, we buy 2 iPads or however many we would need, put them at the middle school, and then analyze the data, and then in September, we can be ahead of the problem.
Yes, I agree with that sentiment. I think there's still people at this table who would say, I don't even think that's necessary. This is not that big of an issue for one day of a year. And the cost, the additional cost of going to the iPad is not justified because it would be better spent on staff and capital improvements. So I think that's a view that we've heard from the table. So I guess we'll lump 2 things together, because again, we don't have a motion here on the table, so I just want to kind of get a sense as a group if this is a discussion we want to continue. So I'm gonna put us into 2 different camps. One camp is we should explore 2 polling places, and we'll work out the details later. But I think Brendan's is wise of, add the iPad at one location this year. So the additional cost of the iPad at a location this year. So the one camp is that, and that covers, the range from we should go to 2 locations this year to, kind of anything 2 locations. And then if we have enough support there, we'll tease those options out. And the other is, I think we should just do what we're doing and use the money elsewhere. So I will guess if we can just get everybody to give me a 1 location or 2 location, and that can be 2 locations now in the future. So Tiffany, 1 location. Richard, I'm gonna say 1 location for now.
I would say I'm capped at the iPad. So if that puts me in 2 locations, yes, but I don't think we should do that this year. 2 locations.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel the same way as Brendan. Just, if we, I think that's.
It's like a 1.5.
Maybe. It's the middle. We're riding the middle, right? Wouldn't you say?
I resent the 2 options. No,
because I agree with the costs, but if we want data, then just do it at the 1 location this year.
Yeah, so
if we want the data.
Again, just
Okay,
to
so-
drive discussion and action, I'm gonna put that vote as a 2 location vote. Carl,
I'm gonna go with the 2.
Christian,
If the choice is just 1 and, if the choice is just 1 and 2, I would go with 2.
Bass.
1.
So, wait, did I do that right?
I think it's 4 twos, 3 ones, and 1 1.5. And Christine is not here.
Christine's not here, so we've got, I wrote down 7 and we have 8 people. It was 2, 2, 2, 2, 5 twos. So at this table it's 5 twos, 3 ones. We've heard 2 of the 2s say, if we're doing, I don't think we should go to 2 this year. We should do the iPad at 1 location this year. I am also in that camp, so I guess that trying to do math here again. I'm category 1.
I think-
not proficient.
I think that what we're saying is there's no support, as far as my reading, for doing 2 locations this year. I think if we are going to explore anything else based on
Correct.
these numbers,
Yes.
it's just, should we do the iPad?
Because out of the 5 that I counted as 2s, 2 of those 5 were not to do 2 locations this year. Yeah. So, so now the question is, now we're going to get to action. We do not have support to go to 2 polling locations this year. So I'm going to propose as action that we get 4 iPads, 6 iPads. We can quibble on the number because the price was not that different between the 2 options. But go to the iPads this year. I'm going to say at our current location, because of the operational challenges that Terry mentioned in terms of holding it at the high school, And I agree with that. I think if we were to do 2 locations, we would have to give the students off that day, at least at the schools that we do it. That would have to be a teacher in-service day or something. So that's another consideration as well from a calendar perspective. So let's get a yay or nay on 4 or 6 to be determined later iPads this year at the middle school, yay or nay?
I'm sorry, compared to what?
Compared to doing nothing.
Doing the paper poll book that we've been using.
Status quo.
Compared to,
Yay is
yay is sign in on the iPad.
And are we convinced that that's gonna be a huge thing for us? I mean, like,
No. Some people are convinced and other people are not. But if we have the iPad, so to Brendan's point, and what I encountered as well, if we have the iPad, we will have the data of who voted. And then we can compare that to the geography of the registered voters, and we can see, is there a disparity? We can have that data.
We can have that data if you, look, you might be daunted by going through poll books, but I've been doing that a good chunk of my life, and that's not really that daunting to me. If you want me to go through the poll books, I didn't want to do something that would be just getting just address numbers, because we don't need to know individual people, we just need to know their street address, and that would be very easy just to lump them into different electoral districts. But I'm not sure, I don't think the problem was ever about whether it was a paper poll book versus an electronic iPad sign-in. And so it seems like this is morphed from the original concern. And I think the point is to be as fair as possible, and some data was provided to you on that I sent to all of you back in November. And I don't know if anyone's looked at it, but I think it's pretty convincing when you're from one half of the district, your chances of getting reelected if you run are near 100%. And if you're from the other half of the district, your chances are lower than 40%. For candidates who've already won an election, which means they're a relatively high-quality candidate, you would assume that if it was the same number of people, there would not be a geographical difference over 25 years.
But we already moved past the issue. Only 3 people supported 2 polling places this year. We're now on the issue of iPads or no iPads at our current poll. Correct, but our administration had said that that's not feasible for this year, logistically. So our president reiterated that.
And to be honest with you, I'm not moved by the data of people running for the school board election. I don't think the sample size is sufficient. I'd like to see the data of people who actually voted and where they lived. And I'm not going to go spend 2 weeks in the basement of the admin building typing up everybody's address, who voted and who didn't vote. So if you want to do so, you are more than free to do so. It's public information, but I don't have the time to do that.
Can we rent the iPads? Is the only option purchasing them?
I think John would.
That is a rental fee. We don't purchase them.
Oh, that is the rental fee?
Yeah, that's the rental fee, yeah.
we could get data and say there's no problem, and we go back to what we were doing next year. So think of it, it's almost like we're taking a research project in a way, and like, we're not committing ourselves to anything long-term.
But if somebody's willing to do the research and save us the money, then, I mean, I know, I could spend that money for you guys elsewhere. That's not a problem. I'll give you a list. But, yeah.
Then, yes, we obviously have the needs of where we can spend it, so, and so that's the question we have now, is do we want to spend that money on the iPad for this year to have that data, or do we want to continue with the status quo? So let's go around and say iPad versus status quo. Tiffany?
Status quo.
Richard?
iPad for right now.
Okay. I'm going to say status quo. Again, Eleanor, I'm with you. I don't think that the cost is justified. Brendan?
Without thinking of any other way to get the data, iPad.
Eleonora?
Christian doing the research in the basement.
Can I change my vote?
You can, go ahead.
Ditto. I would love to see that live streamed.
Be a long video. Carl.
Pay-per-view.
iPad?
Status quo.
Status quo.
Okay, so Eleonora, well, I only have 3 for the iPad. So your status quo.
If we have to spend that kind of money when someone's willing to, if he's willing to get the information for us, we have so many needs.
Sure.
For that money.
Look, and if Christian or anybody else is willing to go check the poll books for the last election, 2 elections, 3 elections, whatever it may be, and what's that? I would welcome that information and bringing this discussion back up. So, okay.
I mean, just the thing, I don't think people realize that I did 70 years of police data for Tokyo by precinct level, which is by far a magnitude greater than what you're talking about. And I did it, that in a foreign language, going on the schedule of the National Diet Library of Japan, okay, which means you can't even touch it. You have to have it brought out to you, and that took me about 2.5 weeks. It's really not that hard.
I think we could arrange for some of those like white gloves for you when you look through the old poll books. Yeah. I don't. To your point, I don't think it's an insurmountable problem. It's just throwing the man hours at it. So, we will leave it at that for now. Thank you for that discussion, everybody. Next item up for bid here is public comments.
John, what do you think about the public polling place?
No takers for public comment. Closing comments from BOE members. I'll start with Bass and whip around.
Okay, I will reiterate that I was very happy, very glad to see the results from the presentation from Megan tonight. That's again, kudos to the teachers and the administration. And I would add one more item, kudos to Coach Daniels doing modified wrestling, undefeated so far. I've seen him in matches. He's doing a great job. Thanks.
Thank you, Bass. Christian.
In many cases, those are things that we don't directly control. And I just want to bring to people's attention a study that was published this year in the American Educational Research Association's journal by Ivy League economist Matthew Kraft, titled, The Big Problem of Little Interruptions. And what he did is observed a whole school district and looked at where actual instructional time was lost. And one of the biggest things he found are these little interruptions, which he mostly attributes to administrative interruptions. And I just want to give some of the figures from his study. So if you take out unexcused absences, these interruptions are about 50% of the total interruptions of class time in the high school, 57% of the interruptions at the middle school, and 46% of the lost time at the elementary school. And what does that equate to? At the high school, that's about 11 days out of 180, and even more at the middle school level, and a little bit less at the elementary school level. And that seems to be something that's in our control. And I would urge people to kind of take a look at that and maybe revise about some of our practices that actually interrupt the flow of classes, interrupt and actually lead to pretty significant losses in terms of instructional time.
Thank you, Christian. Carl.
Hi, I just wanted to thank Megan for everything she did. It's a great job. Kids are doing great, real proud of all of that. I did do my visitation at the schools. I've got nothing bad to say. Richard's going to give you the reports, I guess, within the next couple of weeks, and we're good to go.
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, we'll circle back. Brendan?
Yeah, thanks again to Megan for the incredible work that went into that, and then also just the work that went into creating those results, not only on the administration, but all the teachers, everybody throughout the buildings. Only other thing is congratulations again to John Hines, the director of Lion King Jr., but also the others that were involved, Denise Carter, Jess Henry, and the whole slew of volunteers. It was an extraordinary production. It is always the highlight of the year. for, I think, everybody who gets to be a part of that. And it's just a great showcase of how the arts in this district are such a vital part, not only of the kids' experience, but also the community experience. We had a record number of kids in the program, and also a record number of people, as they would say, fannies in the seats. And then we've got a whole spring selection of shows coming up, so everybody keep an eye on that. And I also want to thank Mercedes, because she's an essential part of Lion King Jr. as well. Thank you for entering stage right just as I was about to finish up. All right, yeah, so just, watch shows, cheer, all that stuff, support the kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Eleanor, I'll circle back to you.
I'm sorry, I had to. Yeah.
No, please.
Congratulations to everyone for everything they've done. It's been a long meeting, so that's it.
Wonderful. Tiffany.
I am going to thank Ava and Madeline, who departed, but they hung in for a long time. I would have left long before they did, so bravo to them. Thank you to Megan for putting that together. Super proud of the academics in Cornwall Central School District. Always have been in this district for over 20 years, and continuously impressed with the education that our children received. I will say the one place we got beat by tuxedo in 7th grade ELA was my daughter's class. So I'm gonna say bravo, and you could have had her.
Thank you, Tiffany. Richard.
Yeah, thank you. Try to keep this short one because it's late too, because I have no voice hardly. So I just want to thank Megan for your presentation tonight. I want to thank all of our teachers and staff for making these great results happen. And you guys are the lifeline of this district, and I'm just really, really proud and impressed. We did have our visitations last week. I just want to thank all of the teachers and staff for warmly welcoming us into your classrooms. And it was clear how much they valued having board members in the schools and seeing us there. So we definitely want to continue that. It was just really great. And lastly, I just want to say I went to the civics fair at the high school last Thursday, and it was just very impressive. Got to talk to a lot of our students about the issues they chose to research and present to us, and just a job well done by all. So with that, have a good night.
Thank you, Richard. I will let my comments about the educational presentation from earlier stand. I will make 2 points. One, on the visitation, it was my first time in the high school seeing the community lunch. I was proud to see just, a lot of life, a lot of vibrancy. What you want to see in a high school, kids being social. A few kids on the phones, not too many though, with their head buried in the phone, not talking to anybody. I just saw a lot of, interaction between the kids and laughter and the different activities going on in the gym and elsewhere. So it's what we want to see in our schools. It was great. And to your point further on the civic fair, I'm glad you reminded me to pull up here. So the teachers who put that on were Mrs. Biasi, Mrs. Maroney, and Mr. Welly. So, great job by them, great job by the students. It was the participation in government class, and I believe they said they had over 100 participants, and they all kind of did trifold billboards in the cafeteria. They actually did 2 shifts, and they had a local issue, and being participation in government, it was, who do you contact for this issue? If it's a pothole, you have to figure out if there's a local road, a state road, a county road, who do you contact? So there's a lot of thought in the presentations from the kids in terms of the issues and who they present to, but really hats off to the teachers who organized that, and Principal Wilhelm. It wasn't just Richard and I that were there. Assemblyman Ekus was there. County Executive Newhouse was there. Supervisor Wojciechowski from the town, as well as Karen Reyes on the town council. Supervisor Bedetti from New Windsor. And Mayor Galliano from the village. So they had a lot of, these folks going around talking about it, and that was kind of the question was, all right, is this a town issue? Is this a village issue? Is this a New Windsor issue? Is this a county issue? Is this a state issue? And there were representatives from all of those levels, so I thought that was really great interaction for the kids to go, I got a problem with the county issue. Go ask Steve Newhouse, he's right there. So that was pretty cool to have. It was the first time that they had done this, is my understanding. So it's something that they should continue, and hopefully they will have the enthusiastic participation from all those different levels of government, and not just those. There was representatives from New Windsor Police, from the Volunteer Ambulance Corps, New Windsor, and other civic organizations. But I just pointed out some of the electeds that were there. So with that, thank you, everybody. We are going to, this is a question, do we adjourn the meeting and then go to executive session? We leave it open. So we're going to go back into executive session. So we're not going to adjourn the meeting. We're going to go to executive session to continue our discussion earlier on bargaining unit contracts. We've got a motion from Christian. Do I have a second on executive session? Second from Richard. We will not conduct any business when we come back out. We're just going to go have a discussion, and then we will come back out and formally adjourn the meeting. Thank you, John, for attending.